Well, the Strait of Hormuz is not just a regional security issue, it is also an economic pressure point. Iran wants relief from American pressure, while Washington wants the waterway fully open to international shipping. And Qatar and Oman are now trying to keep diplomacy alive. So what does this mean strategically? For further analysis, we are joined by an ex-Iranian diplomat, Mehrdad Qunzari. Thank you, sir, for joining me here on World Tonight. Well, Mr. Qunzari, how much leverage does Iran still have through the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, I think it still has considerable leverage because of the fact that it is in a position to disrupt shipping, and when you are in such a position, that affects things like the cost of insurance, the cost of shipping, the kind of considerations that ships and crews have to take into consideration before moving freely. So long as those side issues are hampered, that makes an enormous amount of difference to the volume of shipping and the security of shipping, irrespective of the fact that some ships may get through. And the fact is that Iran could at any time also attack certain shippings if it feels that it is in a position to do so. And that creates uncertainty. So all of these factors together, you have to bear in mind that that gives Iran a great deal of, options in terms of how it exercises its will.
And look, Iran is preparing a list of conditions for reopening the waterways. We know, could those demands become the basis for a new negotiation with Washington?
I think here you have to sort of try to associate your question with the kind of discussions that have been going on between Iran and Oman. If Iran and Oman reach an agreement that is announced at the end of their discussions, whether starting with a temporary arrangement to one that is permanent, then obviously the demands that Iran has will be contained in that agreement. And therefore that agreement, which from the Omani side also receives a great deal of attention from the United States and is, you might say, okayed by the United States before it is brought into bilateral discussions between Iran and Oman, then you can sort of think that once that agreement has been reached, then Iranian conditions have been contained, and that whatever happens next will have a measure of comfort for the Iranian side that some of their considerations have been sort of implemented and taken into account.
Look, Mr. Qunzari, let's move on with Qatar, because Qatar has emerged as an important intermediary between Iran and the United States. How important is Doha's role in this, at this stage, in this situation?
Well, I think Doha's role is critical because of the fact that, first of all, it has a history of dealing with mediation issues of this nature involving Iran. Secondly, the fact is that Doha is stepping in and showing goodwill, irrespective of the fact that Qatar has been a subject of serious attacks in the last several months by Iranian missiles and drones and things like that, inflicting perhaps more than $100 billion of damage to Omani infrastructure. So the fact that they have been able to put that aside and try to help the process in conjunction with positions that are held by the GCC countries, I think Oman gives gives Qatar and Doha a very special position. And the fact is that they are in good relationship with the United States and are able to sort of jointly discuss whatever is being mediated at the same time with the United States. And it's a trusted party. But from the Iranian perspective, at the end of the day, I think that as things stand, countries like Oman and Pakistan have an equally important role to play. And I would say that perhaps in terms of mediation, the role of Pakistan is first and foremost in the mind of the Iranians.
All right, so now I want to continue with Oman, since you mentioned that a couple of times in your response. Well, Oman is also involved in discussions over a possible shipping corridor. Could a regional arrangement succeed, but direct U.S.-Iran diplomacy has struggled?
I think there's a good chance that that can succeed because, first of all, if you go back, I mean, when you talk about these negotiations and the trust factor and things like that, relationship between Oman and Iran has been the steadiest and perhaps the most steadiest of all the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf with the Iranian regime. So that in itself is a position of advantage for them to be able to talk about contentious issues in an atmosphere that can hopefully lead to something. And I think that the Omanis have been patient, despite the fact that they have also suffered as a result of various Iranian drone attacks, which has attacked their infrastructure as well. But I think that they are able to provide the additional factor, and they are able to discuss between them issues that Iran has not been able to discuss directly with the United States. But the issues that Oman brings up includes the, you might say, the points and the views and the wishes that the United States has. So I think that if this process is able to conclude successfully, and there are good signs that we are on that path, then that obviously helps move the situation forward in a way that Iran-US talks had not been able to in the past.
Well, and look, the United States says it has already helped commercial vessels pass through the strait. Does that reduce Iran's negotiating leverage?
No, I don't think it does because of the fact that, the number of ships going through, or as President Trump announced, the Americans announced today or yesterday that some 130 million barrels of oil had gone through the Strait of Hormuz in the last 2 weeks. Well, that is a significant amount, but it's only somewhere between a third and a half of what usually goes through. So that means that a significant portion of oil is still not going through. So that gives Iran a position of strength, puts Iran in a position of strength in terms of conveying the message that it has been consistently trying to convey. So while, as I said, the movement is not nil, but it is far away from where it should be, and it's affecting the international, the economy of the international community, and not just that of Iran and the Gulf states or the United States.
So yeah, as you're saying, movement is reduced here. And, Gulf countries are also investing in alternative ports and pipelines to reduce their dependence on Hormuz. Could this crisis permanently change the region's energy infrastructure in your view?
Well, obviously, the obvious answer is yes, but this is not something that is imminent or immediate. Some Gulf countries have expressed a desire in wanting to seek alternative routes for exporting their oil, but this takes time. And if this, for example, if this present crisis is brought to an end in the next several months or the next few months or several weeks, then you could see plans of that nature being put on the back burner and not implemented because of the heavy amount of investment that all of these would require. So the answer is yes, but this is not something immediate or imminent. It's something that they sort of dangle in this crisis, trying to indicate to Iran that if they want to pursue this kind of policy on a long-term basis, that they are not going to be held hostage to the whims of the Iranian regime, and that they do have options. But exercising those options is something that you cannot say is going to happen now or in the immediate future.
Right, Mr. Kanzari, my last question for you today. In a summary, so to say, are we now looking at a temporary disruption, or could the Strait of Hormuz become part of a much, let's say, larger and longer-term geopolitical confrontation between Iran and the United States?
Look, there is a geopolitical confrontation between Iran and the United States, which has been going on for well over 4 decades. As we speak now, the nature of that confrontation has changed. Today, there are parties in Iran struggling in order to be able to convince the state to agree to some kind of an agreement with the United States whereby the Strait of Hormuz can be opened, the Iranian nuclear file and the fate of the 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium could be decided, so that once that happens, there are possibilities of sanctions reductions, economic investment in Iran, and a path whereby the Iranian regime can manage the cold peace once a ceasefire or a permanent peace has been arranged. What is holding things back is not the historical geopolitical confrontation of the past 40 years between Iran and the United States. It's the internal struggle in Iran between those wishing to open a new chapter and those wishing to promote and pursue the policies of the late supreme leader. The majority, in my view, in Iran, faced with serious problems, is to try to work something out. But the minority are vociferous, and they hold some positions of power, and they are the ones that are holding this back. If that is settled in a positive way, then I think that you will see a new chapter opening up in the Persian Gulf, and the kind of hostility that has existed between Iran and the United States in the past 47 years will gradually fade.
Right, well, thank you so much, Mr. Kanzari, for joining me and having this conversation here on Overnight. So the future of the Strait of Hormuz remains closely linked to the wider confrontation between Iran and the United States. Iran says it's preparing conditions for reopening the waterway. But Washington insists that international shipping must remain open, and regional countries, including Qatar and Oman, are trying to keep diplomacy moving. But despite some signs of progress, shipping traffic remains well below normal levels right now. And with Gulf producers already looking for alternative routes, the economic consequences of this crisis could extend well beyond the current conflict. It's time for a short break here. When we will return, Russia warns Britain that its military targets could be hit in response to Ukraine's use of British-made missiles against targets inside Russia. And the warning comes as Washington is also raising concerns about the possibility of Russia's testing NATO's resolve. Stay with us.